Here I want to talk to you about some examples when they get a little more tricky. So the first thing we're going to look for is any zero exponents, because that's the easiest thing. If I see any zero exponents, I just cross it out. In this case, I see none. The next thing I'm looking for is the rare case where I see some parentheses with a negative. I don't see any parentheses, so I could skip all those directions. Last, I'm going to move all my negative exponents. So I see one negative exponent here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cross that out. I'm going to move it to the top. It's going to be x to the third. Now I also want to point out that I see an x. Without an exponent, it has an invisible 1. Now I'm going to simplify. The best way that I can suggest that you simplify is you first look at the numbers, and then you look at the x's, and then you look at the y's. Now I encourage you to make a chart like this in the beginning, and you can graduate from this chart once you have enough experience. So under each, we're going to make a fraction, and I'm going to put all the numbers, meaning all the coefficients, not the exponents, just the numbers. So I'm going to put a 2 here. I've done that. I'm going to put a 4 here. I've done that. I'm going to put a 3 here. I've done that. I'm going to put a 3 at the bottom. I've done that. Now I'm going to make sure I put all of them in and then simplify. In my x's, I have an x squared on top. I have another x squared on top. I have an x to the first on top. I have an x cubed that moved to the top. And I have nothing on bottom, so I didn't even really need that fraction. Next, with the y's, I have a y to the fourth on top, another y to the fourth on top, and then a y squared on bottom. Now, when it comes to your numbers, if you're planning on not using your calculator or not wanting to deal with very large numbers, I'm going to want to get a smaller number if possible. So I'm going to check if I could divide before I multiply. And to do that, I see what do they have in common? Well, the top and bottom both have a 3, which disappears. So I'm left with an 8 on top. And notice that I put the fraction bar so I can very clearly see that 8 is on top. Next, I have x's. Well, they're going to be on top. That's the only option. There are none on the bottom. And because they're all on the same level, I'm going to be adding the exponents. 2 plus 2 is 4, 5, 8. Now, since I have a couple of y's on the top, I'm going to combine them. This becomes y to the 8th on top over y squared. Now, the two questions are, who has more top or bottom? And by how much? What we're doing is we're subtracting and putting it where it belongs. There are more on top, so the answer is going to be on top, and that is my answer. Starting at the top, I'm going to look for any zero exponents, and I see none. I'm then going to look for any parentheses with a negative exponent. I see no parentheses at all. So I'm going to move my negative exponents. I have a y on top that's negative. It becomes positive on bottom. Next, I'm going to look at my categories. So I'm going to look at my numbers. And look, I only have 24 over 30. My x's, I only have x to the 5th on top, x to the 1 on bottom. And my y's, I only have y to the 4th and y to the 3rd on bottom. So we're going to simplify this just like you learned in middle school, nothing special here. 24 and 30, you can divide 6 out of both. When I divide by 6, I get 4/5. Here I have more on top, and so my answer, starting with my answer, I have more x on top and I have 4 more. On the bottom, these combine by adding y to the 7th. Again, looking at the top of my list, I'm looking for any zero exponents because that's my favorite. Zero exponents, the 0 is attached to the x, so it disappears, turns into a 1. Next, I'm going to take care of any exponents on the outside. So what's going to happen is I have a -4 that's being squared. And then I have a y cubed that's being squared. So this is saying -4 times -4 is 16. And this is the classic power to a power. So I'm going to multiply the exponents. Okay. Starting at the top for this one, I am looking to do any 0 exponents. I see none. Then this is one of the rare cases that you have a negative exponent outside of parentheses. So this is my next priority. I'm going to move these parentheses. So I'm going to do that by crossing it out and moving it down here. 2x to the +4. And there's like a 1 placeholder because that was the only thing in the numerator. Next, I'm going to move any negative exponents, which means this one is going to the top. And now I'm going to take care of the parentheses. I'm going to get rid of the parentheses. I have x to the first on top. I have this x also to the first, an invisible 1. And then I'm going to say, oh, this is 2 to the first, x to the first, and both of them get multiplied times the 4, power to power. So this is 2 to the 4th. Now we always see our coefficients in front, so I'm going to put it out front. So 2 to the 4th and x to the 4th. Now with categories, and this is a little maybe even easier than you need to do categories, but what I would do is I would say, oh, I have 2 to the 4th over here, and then I have x over x to the 4th, which equals x over x to the 5th. So as far as the x's go, I have more on bottom, 4 more on bottom. Now these are small enough numbers that we would ask you to simplify this. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So I have 16 on bottom, and I have nothing on top, so I need a 1 placeholder. Now these last two are really, really tricky. So we're going to need all of our rules. We're going to first look for any 0 exponents, any at all. So it looks like these cancel, and that's it. Next, I'm going to look for that rare case where I have a negative exponent on the outside, and look, I have a negative exponent on the outside. What that means is everything in those parentheses are going to flip. That means I had a 4 on top, it now goes to the bottom. So I'm literally just going to rewrite this entire thing just flipped. And that doesn't take care of the entire exponent, it just takes care of the negative. And just so I don't lose anything, I'm going to rewrite the left one as well. Now comes a decision. Do I want to move all the negative exponents, or do I want to take care of the exponents in the outside? I'm going to suggest you take care of the negatives as soon as possible. So many mistakes come because people mess up with the negatives. So I'm going to move them. So when I rewrite this, now this is messy enough that I'm going to rewrite it, where previously I just kind of crossed it out and moved it. Now it's complicated enough where I'm going to have to rewrite it. So I have 2 and a 5 that doesn't move, an x to the 5th that doesn't move. This x does move, and the y stays where it is, all raised to the 3rd. This next one I have, those don't move, but the y does move, and the x does move, and the y does move. So this is y to the 4th, x to the 3rd, y to the 7th. We could double check that. There's a lot of moving pieces there. Positive exponent stays, negative exponent moved. Negative exponent moved, negative exponent moved. And remember, if I don't see an exponent, I'm going to show the +1, the invisible +1. I actually see that there are enough things that can combine on the inside that I'm going to start by combining. So the 2 and the 5 doesn't move, the y doesn't move, but this is actually an x to the 6th, all raised to the 3rd. Again, invisible 1 exponents, because it's going to help me in a minute. The 3 and the 4 doesn't move, but the x's do combine. I have x to the 5th, And here I have y on the bottom, y on the top. I have more y's on the top. When I subtract them, I have 3 more on the top. And this is all raised to the squared. And again, the one exponent where it's hidden. Now I'm going to multiply everything by the 3. That's 2 cubed, 5 cubed, x to the 18th now, y cubed, 3 squared, 4 squared, x to the 10, y to the 6th. Now I'm going to look to see if there's anything that can cancel. The y's look like they can cancel. None of the numbers can cancel. So I'm left with 2 cubed, 3 squared over 5 cubed without x's. I have x18, x10. I'm left with x28. And then some of my y's cancel. I have y6 on top, y3 on bottom, and I'm left with y3 on top. Question is, are these small enough numbers where we would expect you to simplify them? Probably, actually. So this is actually, I'll put up here. This is actually 8. This is a 9, and this is a 125. And so 8 times 9 is 72 over 125, x28, y cubed. Final answer. I know I'm done. I have no negative exponents. I have no repeated bases, and my numbers cannot simplify any further. So this one is actually a little simpler than this because there's no parentheses. There's no power to powers, although it's messy enough that it's worth going over. So again, I start with the zeros. I tackle any parentheses, and there are none. And then we're going to move any exponents. So this becomes positive. This becomes positive on bottom. Those are all the negative exponents. Now we're going to do categories. Now, if you notice, I did categories over here kind of in my head. From here to here, did you notice? I took care of the numbers, the coefficients first. Then I took care of the x's, and I took care of the y's. Over here, I'm going to do the same. And before I multiply, I'm going to try to divide. 25, 14, 28, 15. My x's, x5, x squared, x4. Now my y's, y13, y4, y squared. Now with my numbers, we're going to simplify this just like a regular fraction. I'm going to look, does anything really simplify? Well, these both end in 5, so I know I can divide a 5 out of both. Divide a 5 out of this, I get a 3. Divide a 5 out of that, I get 5. These are both divisible by 14. 1, 2. What's remaining is 5 and then 6. Now this one is actually x7 over x4, which is x3, and on top. And this is y13 over y to the 5th. Subtracting them, I get y to the 8th. Final answer.